Good. I'm TX Dror. I'm one of the partners at Fika Ventures. We are a seed stage venture capital fund based in Los Angeles where we focus on insurtech among other verticals. Today I have 4 amazing speakers with me to chat about how insurtech companies can win the customer acquisition game through partnerships with other companies in the ecosystem. So maybe before we get started, I would like to introduce our panelists. I think starting from the right, we have Jennifer Fitzgerald, who's the CEO of Policy Genius, one of the largest online insurance marketplaces that has distributed over 160 billion in policies to date. To her left, we have Dror Katzav, CEO of Artidot, that provides AI and machine learning solutions for life insurance companies and works with several of the largest carriers such as Guardian and Pac Life. Next, we have Garrett Cohen, president of CRC's brokerage group. CRC is the leading wholesale specialty insurance distributor, placing more than 24 billion in annual premiums.
34 now.
34, okay, wow.
Who's counting?
Who's counting, yeah.
We bought some stuff.
And last but not least, who's in the hot seat, we have Laura Bennett, who's the president of Chubb's North American Digital Consumer Division. Laura was also formerly a very successful entrepreneur, having started Embrace Pet Insurance. So she's on both sides of the fence and knows the distribution partnership game pretty well. So the way it'll work is I'll direct questions to one of the panelists, but other panelists, feel free to chime in and add your thoughts. So maybe we'll start with Jen though. Policy Genius is now about 10 years old. So if you could talk about kind of the history of the company a bit and sort of when's the right time for a startup to think about building distribution partnerships?
Probably day one, even before you start building product. Thinking about how you get your product in the hands of your ultimate end customers. And it can be an evolution. So from our experience, we started direct to consumer and organic. So a big play in content and SEO, and then direct to consumer. And about a year or 2 in, we started going down the partnership B2B path, right? So starting with digital, moving to offline, because the hard thing about insurance is it's all about distribution, right? And so thinking about when you move from channel to channel, how you think about scaling it, what that allows you to do in terms of controlling what is an uncontrollable feature, which is your customer acquisition cost. Like you got to start thinking about that day zero, even before you build product.
Got it. And maybe a follow-up question there, like how do you think about testing your own channels before you think about partnerships?
I mean, the big thing is, can you get early reads in channels, especially if you are, direct to consumer, you can typically get an earlier read on channels that give you primary data to test that. And the other times it's qualitative feedback from your partners, right? Are they referring more business to you? Are they asking for additional features? Do you see kind of repeat activity? I think those are going to be the good early indicators of whether a specific distribution partnership is going to be worthwhile and scalable.
I've seen some startups, we as a wholesaler are in the more traditional distribution area, but the day one comment is really appropriate. I've seen the mistake before of startups that have gone out, they've gotten capacity, and they haven't necessarily thought about like what the costs are associated with the distribution channel they're choosing to use. So really you could go direct to consumer, you could go through retail brokers, you could go through wholesale brokers, and you need to understand what the costs are associated with those. And in insurance, there's a lot that's made of the margins in insurance and the amount of commission and all these things, but the reality is all those different distribution channels are really an equation of fixed cost versus variable cost. And I've seen, lots of startups say, okay, we've got our deal done, we're ready to start issuing, policies, and we are ready to distribute through the wholesale channel. Okay, that's great. How much can you pay? And they'll be off. They will have cut a deal that is dead in the water before they even get going because they didn't contemplate the cost of that distribution channel. And the carrier is not necessarily going to help them out on that. They'll try to pay as little as possible in all cases. And so I think understanding like what your distribution channel is going to be and kind of doing like a bottom-up pricing of that so that you understand how much margin you need to be effective in that channel is really important.
And maybe for all the panelists here, like how do you think about splitting that acquisition cost? Because if you have 2 partners at the table, then you start thinking about, okay, if we're going to spend X amount on the consumer over time, we have to think about how to split the economics. So any kind of good kind of rule of thumb or guidance on how you should be thinking about it?
First, I think the industry as a whole has a tendency to share that cost and share that upside. That's the whole commission model. And I think from a startup perspective, as a startup, if you can ride over that model somehow, either by sharing the commission with the broker or sharing the upside with the carrier on one of those sides, and therefore reducing the fixed cost, you're better set up for success because you're more aligned with the success of your distribution partner or your carrier on the back end.
Yeah. I think a lot of it also is market driven, right? So if you need to pay a certain amount in a certain channel, the market's going to kind of drive that. And so, again, kind of like that bottom-up pricing idea is really important because you need to understand what's being paid in each of those channels. And to some degree, we don't decide or dictate it. It just is what it is, driven by market conditions.
Yeah, I think that's true on the B2B and B2C side. Like, it's really market driven, right? And being able to understand that, be quick enough to react to it. I mean, we've seen it because we're on both sides of the market, right? So we have carriers on our panel, and we also distribute and acquire, end consumers. We've had startup carriers want to be on the panel, and they don't pay market, and they don't understand that commission. Carriers pay X, and they come in saying, "Great, we've priced our product to be 0.7x," and that's just not going to fly. You got to understand market realities.
And Garrett, I guess for those in the audience who don't understand CRC's business as well, it seems like on the surface you guys do 24 billion in annual premium. So you guys seem to be self-sufficient from an underwriting to distribution standpoint. So maybe you could talk a bit about CRC's business and why are you looking for distribution partners? It feels like you guys could do it all on your own.
Well, kind of. But really we're connected to distribution partners because we're wholesale, right? So most of our customers are the retail brokers, and we trade with, around 50,000 retail brokers, and we add around 700 a month. So it's a big number that we distribute into. The company CRC Group has brokerage and binding is a large piece, and that all trades through retail brokers. We're the largest wholesaler of life and benefits. That's the next vertical. We acquired Benefit Mall, which is part of the increase in the premium. And then we have a program division that does $3 million. And that program division distributes in lots of different ways. It depends on the program. If it's a doctor program, if it's taxi drivers, like whatever. Some of that goes direct to retailers. It could even go directly to the end buyer potentially. But for us, when we think about distributing, most of it is through our retail partners. And we have to think about a few different aspects of that from a technology standpoint. Firstly, we're trying to connect with them through APIs where we can now. That's pretty new, but our company has gotten pretty good at it. We have 160 APIs. Currently, we're going to do $750 million of business via API this year. Most of our retail brokers aren't ready for it yet, and you also have to kind of look at what products you can connect that way. So, we're trying to find the targets there that we can connect with in that regard. We're also capable of doing like some white labeling so that we can build things for them so that they could go directly to their customers and do it that way. But a lot of the digital aspect of customer acquisition for us is going to wind up being like one layer behind these retail broker partners of ours and figuring out how we could best integrate with them.
And Laura, you've been on both sides of the equation. So you're a founder and now you're working with one of the largest carriers. So you've seen both sides. So maybe you could walk us through sort of, I think from a founder perspective, then on a large carrier perspective, how do you think about partnerships?
I just remember being at Embrace early days, and no one would partner with us. I mean, yes, we were thinking about it from the beginning, but they were like, "Who are you? And what is this pet insurance?" So it was a struggle for us, and it took us quite a long time to earn our street cred with partners, and we had to do it actually through we were an MGA, so our insurance partner helped us. I mean, it was in their interest. We landed USAA. I thought that was like the best, most amazing thing because USAA is so hard. It's so hard on you. You have to be perfect. But so now, from the carrier side, but the world is very different today than, say, those were early days, and that was like 15, 20 years ago, a long time. Today, we're a startup within Chubb. And so we're looking for distribution partners ourselves. And so we can't be the, hey, we're Chubb, you should do business with us. We have to earn that right too. And so it's been an interesting sort of approach. But yes, the doors are easier now. And then, we're getting some pretty good, feedback from people. They kind of love what we're doing. They are interested in the products. Well, products are aimed at millennials for the life that they lead. It's sort of a more modern life, more modern products. And so people are beginning to become aware. So that's, so it's like this building a partnership on reputation, but actually you have to deliver the goods, right?
And I guess it's pretty interesting that Jen talked about thinking about partnerships from day one, but maybe for Laura and Garrett, like what kind of credibility does a startup need in order for you to pay attention? Because I guess even at ITC, probably 100 companies walk up to you like, hey, we want to do a partnership with Chubb or CRC. So how do you guys think about evaluating a company? What's important to you as you think about a partner?
I realized with our technology building several years ago that even though I'm told we're fairly advanced for the world we exist in, that we're really not great at building technology. So it's not our core competency. We're slow. We have getting idea to finish just is tough. So that was the first thing I realized. Second one is there's lots of startups that are raising tons of money, right? So they're raising $30 million of focusing on like a really specific thing. If I went to our board and said, I need $30 million to do anything like that, they would laugh me out of the room and, it'd never get done. So there's lots of cool startups that are building, good stuff, and they've got some money to spend on these ideas. And then the third issue that I noticed is, we have partners that come to us and they say, hey, we want you to work with this platform or this network. We want you to plug your stuff into this aggregator if you can. And so we've got partners and vendors that are coming to us and saying, we want you to use this platform or that platform. So because of that, we realized we needed to be really flexible and quick and nimble in partnering, doing proof of concepts, looking at startups and seeing what's out there. And because of that, we're pretty open to it. And so we are really interested in what people are doing. I think wholesalers are a really good spot for startups to talk to because we have a massive distribution channel, obviously. We trade with all the retailers, and we have top-level, high volumes with all the major insurance carriers. And we're fairly neutral. There's only like 3 big wholesalers, and so you don't offend too many people by spending time with us. And so, for us, it's really important to find like what's out there, who can we partner with, what do they have, and a lot of that does actually relate ultimately to how we distribute the product.
We, I'm much more open to talking with young companies because I was there. I know what it's like. But if we're looking at those that have some kind of proprietary distribution, some way. That's ultimately what we're looking for. Is that. But we also we've learned a lot from our young startup partners. And so we know we're growing, we're changing, and we're using the ability of these like from a technology perspective. And we are actually quite good at technology. We are really solid in that. And we've been able to also pick up some pretty good tips. So we sort of work collaboratively. So I look for somebody that knows what they're doing, is open to we both gain from the partnership. It's not one-sided where it's just, hey, we're big, therefore we must win. That's not how it works. It has to be a relationship, and it has to be, there has to be a future in it. There has to be a growth, right? So that's what I look for.
And one common term that comes up is the word exclusive. It comes up in every partnership conversation, whether it's on the startup side or sort of the carrier wholesaler side. Like, how do you guys think about it? Sort of, is that a death blow to a startup company, or that's a good way to get the partnership going?
I think it's always a question of goodwill between the parties. Like the carrier, the startup, the distributor need to see eye to eye to how success looks like and how everybody share that economic. Obviously, if say a carrier would want to have certain exclusivity that is too limiting, then the startup cannot execute and would fail at one point, and the carrier would be left with nobody supporting the platform they just bought. So it's not in anybody's benefit to corner a company to such a point. On the flip side, the experience we had in partnering with big insurance companies is that it was very hard until we unlocked the first one. Now that we have, you mentioned Guardian, Pacific Life, others, now that you have those examples and I come in, it's no longer, hey, look at this cool platform and cool technology. It's look at this cool platform and cool technology that produced that amount of premium for this company and improved the productivity of the agents in that company, and so on and so forth. So the discussion is very different. And the insurance companies and brokers that we work with understand that they're not the only one on the platform. They get the upside from being not the only one on the platform because we do see other data that they don't see by themselves because they see only the data they see. So there's obviously data and privacy and how we navigate those discussions, but I think everybody now understands the benefit of this partnership and collaboration, and we're no longer in the dynamic we had a few years ago. It was like, if you work with me, you work only with me, which doesn't make sense to either party.
Yeah. I've seen it limiting sometimes too if you cut like the wrong exclusive deal. So I've had a startup that's like, oh, we agreed to sign and exclusive issues go kind of both ways, both with the carriers. I had one startup that kind of made the mistake of signing like a 1-year exclusive arrangement with a carrier without, I was advising them at the time, and they did it without telling me, and it like killed them for a year because they had agreed to a 1-year exclusive. They lost all their leverage in negotiation, and they ultimately weren't able to get a deal done with that carrier, and it basically delayed their startup by like a year. On the flip side, in distribution, wholesalers, retail brokers, everybody loves to have exclusive stuff because it helps us differentiate. If you're a company that's bringing a new product to market, the good thing about exclusives is, in theory, whoever you are getting some access to should care more, and they should try to protect it, and they should try to sell it, and maybe you're new and you're trying to scale up. If you open up to everybody right away, you're often kind of like nobody, nothing to anyone. So if you do some exclusives or limited distribution, it should make people care more about you, and it gives you the ability to kind of scale and test things out as you grow. And so there is some value in that from an exclusive standpoint.
I'll react to that briefly and say that it's slightly different than exclusivity. As a startup, you have so many things you can do. So if you work with a partner and a partner do want to work with you, they overload you with things that you have to do and promise that you would deliver and didn't really build in the back end that you need to build, that you won't go and do other partnerships. You just want to try and make that one successful. And you get an exclusivity dynamic without enforcing exclusivity. So when it scales, the startup can scale it without partners too, but you got the benefit of being first, therefore tweaking it to your needs better, as well as getting a first mover advantage without forcing legal structures that they're not useful.
And Dror, you're in the business of helping a lot of your customers drive efficiency by showing them actual data and results. I guess, what's your advice to kind of founders in the room though? Because I think on one hand, you can show a lot of data and show, hey, if you partner with XYZ, this could be the potential outcome. Is it about that, or is it to kind of Garrett's point about driving some credibility to begin with? So maybe you could walk us through how much does data factor into kind of partnership distribution decisions today?
So I'll get to the data in a second. I think the core story of what we do is that essentially policyholders, they may shop a little bit online, but most of them buy from agents. And eventually the agency business has a lot of turnover, and policyholders on the life side especially find themselves with nobody kind of shepherding them through the lifetime of the policy. The carrier don't know how to provide a service. If the agent disappear or gone or just have too many clients on their plate, they don't engage with them. There's a lot of missed opportunities for upsell, cross-sell, retention, re-engagement, and so on and so forth. And now there are different ways to tackle that issue. The way we do that is by partnering with the insurance company or with the wholesaler or the broker, get access to the data, run the AI to identify engagement opportunities, and then go and engage. And what that generates from a data perspective is a lot of very tweaked and very segmented campaigns where I know who to talk to, what to talk to them about, when to talk to them, and so on and so forth, to make sure it's very, very surgical. And on the other hand, it creates top line with not a lot of cost because they're already your customers, you already have a relationship. It's just figuring out the right opportunity to engage and intersect an upcoming lapse or generate upsell and cross-sell at the right point in time.
And maybe a follow-up question there. How do you think about data ownership and data sharing? Because when you get into partnerships, naturally you put a pool of customer information together and sort of, at the end of the day, if the partnership doesn't work, who owns the data, who owns the customer? How do you think about all of that?
So I can share our strategy. I'm sure different companies have different strategies. Our strategy is that your customers are your customers. And that's how we got into this partnership, and that's the reason we came into this partnership, and they're still your customers. But there are learnings that we learn by running our models on your data that are our learnings. So at any point in time, we've learned from this data. The models are better. They're also better for you. Other companies have different data, therefore their learnings are going to be also different. So the model gets better over time because the model sees more examples and more situations in real life while maintaining this kind of barrier that your customers are your customers.
For us, we started collecting underwriting data in 2016 on everything we place. And our old insurance systems, they have name, address, the policy, but it didn't really have any of the useful data we needed about the accounts that we were placing. So we started figuring out, okay, what's the data that we need to capture that's relevant to this account to underwrite it? And we started capturing on everything we place. And so we have a really massive data set that allows us to sort of reverse underwrite the whole wholesale marketplace. That data we're very protective of for obvious reasons. And we used to share data with some companies like I guess I won't mention names, but we pulled back on that. We stopped sharing data in general. But where we do share it is we will use it actually with startups. If you're looking to build something or you're interested in looking at something and you want to reverse underwrite the market and see if the idea works, we can do that, and we're happy to use it that way. That helps the startups, that helps us. We use it with our retail partners, so if they want to look at something, we could use it that way. We use it with our carrier partners if they're interested in developing new product. We use it with them, and so the data game is hugely important now. And but I think you're going to continue to see that as a trend where people can, especially guys with volume, are going to be more and more protective of their data and less likely to share it over time.
Super helpful. I know a hot topic is embedded insurance, and then I think a subtopic it's embedded distribution. So I think the first wave of a lot of insurtech companies were trying to sell on their own, and now more and more of them are pivoting or thinking about sort of additional ways which they can distribute kind of what they're selling. So I know, Jen, you launched PG Pro not too long ago. So if you could talk a bit about PG Pro, what that means for Policy Genius, and sort of how that helps sort of broaden the distribution reach for you.
Sure. I mean, some quick background on PG Pro, over the years we've built the full platform and then the BG operations for life insurance, and we're the single largest distributor of term life insurance in the US. And be able to do that for small face policies, right? Your target premium in a term life policy is typically sub $1,000. Most brick and mortar brokers, FAs, RAs, their target premium is like $50K plus, and they lose money writing small face term, right? And over the years, we got a lot of inbound questions from that community. Hey, how do you guys do this? But the funny thing is, so in the industry, right, there's the producer incentive trips. Once we got big enough, we were literally the only company there that was writing term. And everybody was like, how the hell are you guys like doing this at scale? And, being able to do this profitably for sub $1,000 premiums. And it's because of what we built on the back end to allow us to do it. So we had questions over the years, and we're like, we knew that there was an opportunity to expose a light version of this, and also, the processing and fulfillment part to everybody who wants to write term life insurance but hates doing it. So, that for us, it was always agnostic how a customer comes to us. We wanted, whether it's through an advised relationship or a self-directed consumer who finds a piece of our content on Google, or hears about us on a podcast, or uses Credit Karma to track their credit score. We've always been agnostic about the channel. We just wanted to deliver the best experience to end consumers on all the consumer lines of insurance. So launched that earlier this year, and still half of insurance is written offline, right? Through your traditional brick and mortar channels, FAs, RAs. So it just opened up a new part of the market for us. even for consumers who start the journey online and ultimately finish it offline with the traditional agent or financial advisor, it just opened that up for us. So it's been a piece that we're really excited about because it's a big part of the market that needs to be served as well.
That's great. Maybe the other problem that a lot of my companies are trying to solve for is merging the online and offline channels. So it's pretty hard. You could market to someone offline, but convert them to an online channel. So I guess for Garrett and Laura, like, how do you guys think about kind of developing partnerships that will help you kind of accelerate that kind of online and offline merger in terms of distribution?
So we've always believed that it's not just about online. So we are fully digital, but it should be something that you have the ability to call in and reach out to someone. And so that is just sort of how we work. We work with our partners. If a partner is a carrier, another carrier, they might take the calls and be part of that, or we share, like we kind of do both, or they also do selling just in their contact center. So it's really it's important, and it should always be there, and it's not just by itself, but it's also important to add chat and chatbot, like just people just need sort of their way as they wish, right? So that's how I look at it. And it's most of our partners are like-minded in that respect.
Got it.
I think for us, when I think about the online versus offline, over time I expect to see some of the more efficient. And a lot of the stuff we do is pretty complex, and because of that, the online world is probably going to be more like API driven, but not necessarily automatic quoting. It's just going to be submit by API, and a carrier might, they might not quote something automatically, but they might decline something automatically. And we're starting to do tests with carriers on that so that we can do automatic clearances. And then ultimately the underwriter's gonna have to look at it, and they're probably gonna talk to our folks and that sort of thing. At the lower end of the segment though, there's a lot of commercial insurance that could still be kind of commoditized. And we're starting to see more of that move online. And so like our cyber portal that we've set up and that we're just using internally at the moment is slowly scaling up. We have internal adoption issues, but ultimately we'll get all of our brokers running all of the cyber insurance business through there. But even now we're doing about $1 million a month, having rolled this out pretty recently, of full API driven, low touch, no touch business. And I think that segment of the market is going to continue to be more and more commoditized, more and more digital. But in commercial insurance, at least, it's interesting where that stops, because commercial insurance gets very complex very early. And it's one of the reasons why a lot of the direct-to-consumer models or direct-to-business models haven't worked particularly well, because people have questions. They need somebody that knows what they're talking about. And the same thing's true in our world. So, at the very low end, I expect to see more commoditization, full transactions done online. And then as you move up the scale, the digital connections are going to be, more just API driven eventually. Well, eventually, all of our submissions will want to be an API, and then the carriers will be able to kind of like block out what they don't want to see, and it'll go back to human interaction and discussions.
I think in addition to that, from our perspective, one question is efficiency. On the life side as well, same as commercial, very quickly policies become very complex. So it's very hard to illustrate that, even know what you want to have as a consumer, purely online, unless you buy a simple term product. But most of the waste of time that agents have with the consumer is the consumer does want to buy the policy, or don't know what they want, or not really ready to buy, or just no-shows for meetings. And this is where online can help tremendously by better targeting, better qualifying, better scoring, better prospecting, to bring them to the room only when they know what they're talking about, they know that they're ready, they know what they need, and it's now a question of how do I structure the policy to feed those needs exactly and file the policy. And then the other side of it is scale. Scaling offline also has the OpEx limitation, where scaling with an online operation is much easier. So building this funnel where you do much more nurturing and prospecting online, but then funnel all the kind of high quality meetings to turn to offline meetings, that's to me the model that's probably going to be most sustainable in the near future.
So we'll move to the kind of, I call it the rapid fire segment of the panel now. So I think we'll go around and ask each panelist to quickly talk about, in a minute or so, talk about one successful partnership and one partnership that didn't work out. So if you want to name names, fine. If you don't want to, that's fine as well. But describe what made a good partnership happen and why a bad one didn't work out. Maybe we'll start with Jen and we'll just go down.
Sure. One great partnership for us was actually our first foray into building an exclusive insurance policy. So we did that with Bright House Financial, which was MetLife's retail spinoff, and built with them, an accelerated underwriting term life insurance product that's exclusive to the PG platform. So both sides, aligned on the vision, how we wanted to build it, what were the target customers, invested deeply on both sides in terms of the integration, the underwriting model, how we get the pricing right, and it was great. And timing is everything in this business, and we launched it month 2 of the pandemic, which was perfect timing because we were able to underwrite up to $2 million without a medical exam for top 3 risk classes of customers under 45 years old, with the exact same pricing and sometimes more competitive than with the full paramedical exam. So I think that was a really successful partnership because of early alignment on, very shared visions, shared commitment on both sides to build and invest. Unsuccessful partnerships, probably on the distribution side, where I think there's, and you do this all the time, which is why you test, there's a mismatch of types of customers, right? So one partner will have one type of customers that maybe not be a great risk pool of prospect for us, right? So, but you can't avoid those. You just have to be able to quickly learn whether this is going to work or not, price it appropriately if there is a price that it works, otherwise you move on.
I'll name the same carrier for both, and it's also going to talk to the maturity of the InsurTech ecosystem. This successful partnership was with Pacific Life which was the first introduction for our platform to the US. We partnered with Pacific Life, they kicked the tire on the platform, we ran a pilot program. It was very successful, but they never planned for this to be successful, so they didn't know what to do the day after the pilot ended. And it took them about 2 years to come back to the table and say, and that's the more successful partnership, but they say, okay, now we figured out what we actually want to do with you guys, which is slightly different than what we started with, but this is something that is now it's 3rd year of a program that is running with them, where they do know what they want to get from us, and they do know how they're going to operationalize this and turn this into premium or efficiency. And I think also as a maturity for the industry, now we got to the point where those type of discussions happen much earlier in the process, and it's obviously a win-win.
From a successful standpoint, I'll mention a couple quickly. One, we're not great at building our own technology. We learned early on we don't want to manage our own APIs. So our guys have been having success with Herald API, managing that for us. That's a newer relationship that's doing really well. I also had, and if anyone was in the broker tech venture thing yesterday, I mentioned this yesterday, so I apologize if you were there. We've had a good one with TrustLayer. So, we trade with these 50,000 some odd retail brokers. When we appoint them, we say, give us your Arizona emissions information. They tell us, and then we ask them to update us again. And then nobody ever updates us. And I don't have software to track this. And I'm not going to hire a room full of people to chase all of our retail brokers when, their E&O comes up and asks them to update it. So TrustLayer does that for us now. And as a test, we check to see, it also creates a potential revenue stream for me. One of the few areas where a wholesaler can kind of retail is actually other insurance agents and brokers E&O, because agents and brokers don't want to send it to their competitors to look at. So we handle quite a bit of agents and brokers E&O on behalf of our retail brokers. So now when we ask for their E&O, we could also say, and by the way, do you want us to look at it or help you out? And that was too successful. We got about a 20% hit ratio. But now we're going to start scaling, sending out like 7,000 something of these a month, and so now all of a sudden I'm going to wind up with like 1,500 leads a month that I don't know what to do with. So kind of a good problem to have that we're now trying to figure out how do we address it. On the bad side, I would say lots of people make new products, and sometimes selling new products is hard. And so we've had, I won't mention any company names, we've had a few times where kind of like new insurance products have gotten launched, and they seem like great ideas, and the reality is when you launch a new insurance product, sometimes it goes slow. It's hard to educate the retail channel on what it is and how it works. And so we've had a number of failures on that front where you launch a new product and it doesn't go.
So I'm not going to name names, but I'll tell you the general characteristics. For those that succeed, our first go-to is their spiritual alignment. And it really is, are you both headed in the same direction and will work together as a relationship, not a transaction? And that that the partner knows that it's not, you aren't done when the contract is signed, that you have to actually have a plan, and in fact you need to discuss that before the contract is signed as to what the partner intends to do to get the volume, right? And when that is aligned really well, it works fabulously. On the other side, you have to be careful that when you have big names that come to you and are excited about partnering with you, and you're like, oh my God, I can't lose this, and you twist yourself into a pretzel to make it work because they want something that's not actually what you do well. And so we've had some samples of that, and luckily we did not go forward. We actually said no, which, you have to then justify to your senior management why you said no to these very big names that seem fabulous and all of that, but you have to have discipline around it, and because you're only going to just go, it'll be worse if you have the big name, you celebrate the signing, you're going to do it, and then it complete failure because it's very likely to be, and then you have more explaining to do than just by being disciplined up front. So that's sort of how we approach these things, and it's a little bit painful, but you have to do it. It's the right thing.
So one last question, then we'll open up to 2 or 3 questions from the audience. So I think the goal of this session is for a lot of the founders in the room to rush up to you after the panel to ask you for advice. So we'll go around very quickly to talk about one thing you'd be willing to help startups in the room think about as it relates to distribution.
I can start. What to do between like day 0 and day 100 to think about how to get distribution off the ground. Something I've been thinking about for Policy Genius for 10 years, and then for years after that as a McKinsey consultant to some of the big carriers in the U.S. So it's the biggest piece. I think people often ignore it, especially founders early on who are like, I got to build product, I got to raise money, I got to hire a team. It's distribution, and that looks different in your first 100 days than it does in year 2 and year 3. So happy to chat about it.
We would love to share our story and our learnings with founders in the audience that are starting their journey as well, especially on how to partner with the big carriers or the big distributors, and some fun learnings from this process. And same goes for like carriers or distributors in the audience that want to talk about how to leverage the data to drive more efficient top line. We would love to talk about that as well.
Yeah. I think thinking about scalability is important too. So I mentioned before just kind of thinking about the channel that you're going to go into and the costs associated with that. But at the same time, for startups, you have to be able to kind of like flip the switch and hopefully go kind of quickly and have something that scales. And it's very different depending on what type of product you're trying to sell. And so, I think that's an additional thing that's important to think about as you're starting out is okay, does this actually work in a scalable way?
And I, even today, I was talking to an entrepreneur, and one thing I talk about a lot that people don't think much about is the cost of being in multiple channels. So it's not just, okay, I'm in 1, I'm going to go to 2. There's implications of that. That means you're splitting your attention, and maybe you haven't even, so you're half doing it, right? You've got to think about that. And the strategy around raising your next round of funding, you might feel you need an extra channel, but maybe you don't actually need to do it. Maybe you have mock-ups, you have a total plan, but you don't spend a single dime on it. And so just advising on channel strategy, because it's not something that many founders that I speak to have actually thought about. they feel like they need to run after too many things.
It's a great point. Yeah,
I
don't
apologize.
chase
I've been
everything.
told we're out of time, but if you guys want to come up to us after, we have a couple of minutes at the back of the room. But thank you so much for joining us today.